Today we're gabbing with Dylan Hafer, who hosts Betches Mentioned It All podcast and does all things Bravo over at Betches. He's a constant familiar face at every Bravo event I ever go to, and we get a blast together at BravoCon. I'm excited to have him on today to discuss who we think are the winners and losers of Bravo in 2023. Dylan, how are you?
I'm so good. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited. This was a good opportunity to really reflect and look back on what's been a wild year from start to finish.
It's also one of those things where it's like, wait, was that this year? Was that last year? It's like it is a good exercise. It really is. So just so people know what we're gonna do, we are gonna go through like 3 to 5 winners and losers each, back and forth of just it can be a person, it can be a show, a cast member. Kind of we can have creative answers, but I'll start with a winner that I have, which is just, and this might be oversimplifying what the actual back end looks like, but I'm going to say the casting department over at Bravo. I feel like we had a really good crop of new additions to Bravo this year. We had the entire new Roni cast, including Jenna Lyons, who was a huge get, regardless of whether you thought that she really worked or not in the end. Like, it was a huge get to have her. We had some great additions on Jersey: Rachel Fuda, Danielle, Jen Fessler, Jennifer on OC, Taylor Armstrong and Tamara Judge came back, Monica on Salt Lake City, even Allie on Pump Rules, I think, was a good addition, JT on Southern Charm. There was a lot of good people that we got added. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, actually, it's so interesting. My One of my winners is like sort of the same thing, but from a different angle. That I feel
Okay.
like the the new housewives themselves are winners this year, because something I think is interesting, as observing the fandom and how people respond to shows on social media and stuff, is new cast members can have a really difficult uphill battle to sort of cement themselves as important parts of a cast. And I
Yeah.
think over the last few years we've seen some sort of false starts in the from the casting department, like on Salt Lake, them trying to add anyone to the original cast that really would stick, or on OC, we've seen a couple seasons of one and done housewives. And so it is pretty remarkable, I think, in this span of about a year, how many new people, not only has casting done a good job of finding them, but that they really have clicked with the fans in a way that I don't think you can really predict.
No, and I think it probably on first glance it kind of feels like a layup. Like, yeah, of course the casting department wins, but like you said, we've had a lot of misses recently. Diana from Beverly Hills comes to mind. Like, she was like, it's like we've had some people that really didn't connect. So, and especially even with Monica on Salt Lake, it's like she is connecting in like such a deep way. She's making such a big impact. She's like a bomb on that cast, honestly. And it's like it makes you excited for the seasons going forward, which isn't always the case for the first season housewife.
Completely. I think BravoCon was sort of I realized with New York how much people really enjoyed that cast and were
Same.
excited to see them. And that was one of those things where you could imagine going to BravoCon and the New York panel being like kind of an afterthought, like people sort of being like, I don't really need to see like what Uba and Jessel are up to. But it was that was a packed house. People were so excited to see them all weekend long. And I think regardless of how good the season was, it's like, oh wow, that worked. Like people feel like they're real housewives.
They connected. There were a lot of connections, I think, that were made between people on Bravo and to the viewers, which is I think the most important thing.
Totally.
If you were to pinpoint an MVP of a new edition on any show, do you have one?
It's God, it's tricky because there really are a bunch. I mean, I
Mhm.
think Monica maybe has been the loudest voice out
Yeah,
of all of the new people this year. In terms of the one that kind of snuck up on me as a favorite, I would say Jen Pedranti from Orange County, because
love her.
she brought a lot to the season in terms of storyline, both all of her personal life stuff and then her weird relationship with Tamra that was tough to figure out. But I also just think she seems like a fun hang and like a natural addition to that group in a way that is sort of the top thing you could hope for when casting a new housewife on a show that's been around for so many years. It's just somebody who feels like they belong there.
Yeah, and I think that she held her own, considering everything that Tamra sort of did to essentially throw her under the bus, and she
Yeah.
kind of she remained steady, and I think making an impact when somebody so when such a big presence and personality like Tamara's coming back into the fold too, to make some sort of impact on a season like that, I think is saying a lot of her potential. Okay, so Dylan, let's get your first winner.
Okay, so my first winner is Lisa Vanderpump. I was going back and forth because I feel like there are a few winners out of the whole like Scandival
Yeah,
situation, but I settled on Lisa because I think not only, I mean, obviously Vanderpump Rules had a huge season 10, and that was kind of something no one could have predicted, like just wild.
yeah,
But Lisa, I think, had a great year kind of even beyond that because she's Vanderpump Rules at the same time it was cemented as kind of like a core Bravo property. She got those Emmy nominations, which I think was, I mean,
huge.
major, so unexpected. But she's still expanding her hospitality business. BravoCon weekend, they announced her latest venture in Vegas. She has, I think, a restaurant or a bar opening in Tahoe, which is like, I think she's been able to kind of continue to build that brand. And she has another spinoff coming to Hulu next year in a way that most housewives just couldn't really sustain. And I think it's super impressive. And as much as you can kind of say what you want about her presence on reality TV, but I think her business acumen and her sort of success off screen is kind of undeniable in a way that I don't know, it sort of baffles me,
No,
honestly.
totally. And like I think the show could have been on its last legs, and by extension, she could have been on her last legs just as a personality on Bravo. She's not on Beverly Hills anymore. And I think the prospect of her coming back is like kind of remains pretty slim. But it's almost like they all capitalized on it, right? I mean, like Lala did the merch and the podcast, Sheena, same thing, Ariana and Katie, same thing. But like she capitalized the most in the way that she always has, right? But this was the biggest opportunity in years to make it work. And I agree. Like you kind of thought that maybe it was sort of like, okay, well, they throw her on a girls trip in the future, and like that's what we'll see from her. You're right. She is a big winner of this year.
She's always been Bobby Fischer playing chess.
And also it's also interesting because she remains a winner, even if like I found myself at least throughout Scandival, like really disagreeing with like the way that and maybe she was kind of ahead of her time in doing this in terms of like extending an olive branch a little bit to the Toms, which I think now more people are sort of thinking that way. I want to say it's sort of like an overcorrection, but in that first Watch What Happens Live appearance, she was sympathetic to him, and I think that she got a lot of heat for that. And so I think to call her a winner, even in spite of that, is a testament to what she's been able to do this year.
Absolutely.
Okay, so a first loser. I'm gonna go with Ramona Singer. It's low hanging fruit, but I think that I mean, we all know what happened with her. Like I think that she was skating by for so many years on so many like straws that almost broke the camel's back with her, but it was almost like there was like lacking that much evidence for them to force Bravo's hand to like finally get rid of her and finally kind of show her that actions have consequences. And it was that exchange, I think, with the Page Six reporter that really kind of cemented the fact that she is out of this world, probably for good, even though her season is still going to air. I don't think she'll be like I doubt we'll see her doing any sort of official press, outside of like her own podcast or with Avery or something like that. I don't know. I think that it was just kind of like, she gave us a lot over the years, but she finally lost.
Yeah, it's tough if you're in that space of kind of being like the like problematic fave where it's like, okay, like I know deep down she's probably not a great person, or maybe I've like seen a rumor, like some comment or something that suggested that she did something wrong, but this was, I mean, if you were really paying attention, you could have figured it out
Of
sooner. But I
course.
think that sort of BravoCon chain of events was really just kind of the nail in the coffin, where it's like, okay, if you're paying attention at all, it's impossible not to know what's going on here. And yeah, I mean, I definitely suspect that this girls trip will be the last we really see of her, at least on like the official NBCU channels. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like the whole Roni legacy thing has been a little bit cursed overall, but
Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of over for her,
Yeah,
I think.
it's and there's probably not that much more to say about it, but to me, she was just sort of like the obvious person to mention. Who was your first loser that you thought of?
My first loser is Jen Shaw, and
Mm,
I think in an obvious sense, obviously she went to prison this year for like a 6-year sentence, which I think would kind of put anybody in the loser column. But I think sort of more existentially than that, seeing how Real Housewives of Salt Lake City has turned it around for season 4, which I think pretty unanimously people think is a great season of
their
Housewives.
best yet.
At the beginning of at the beginning of this year when Jen was being sentenced, I remember talking to Heather around the time her book came out, and she was really kind of pessimistic about how the show was going to regroup without Jen. She was like, Jen is the star. She's the loudest voice in the crowd. I think it felt to a lot of us like the last couple of seasons would have lacked kind of any real momentum without Jen's storyline playing out. And so to see how Salt Lake has recouped without her, and Monica, bringing so much noise. I think Angie has been like a shocking turn of events, the way that she has kind of worked herself
Totally.
in. Mary coming back, obviously, like it felt like Bravo knew they were in a tough spot, and the women also did, and they kind of put in the work to make it work. And I have to imagine, I don't know if Jen gets much Bravo in wherever she is right now, but I I have to imagine that if she knows that people are receiving this season well, that she is really angry about that.
Totally. And it's, you every like month and a half or so, we'll see something pop up in page 6 from her publicist, like directly from her publicist. And it's something that they'll just put out there. It's like the latest with that Jen Fonda thing, which is funny to laugh about for like a day. And then it's sort of like, okay, like she's just trying to stay
Yeah.
relevant and capitalize on the kind of hotness around the show still.
Yeah, and I think if she were only in prison for a year, maybe I could see there being sort of like not necessarily a redemption arc, but some sort of opportunity waiting for her on the other end. But 6 years is a really long time. And I mean, maybe she'll get like a Zeus, coming out of prison special or something, but I don't think anybody's going to be waiting for her on Housewives.
Not a Zeus coming out of prison special, Dylan. No, I totally agree. And it's sort of like, I think that was honestly, I think for the however big this quote unquote Shaw squad is, or like the people that really kind of remain loyal to her throughout, like that was the hope. I think that like, because she is kind of intrinsic, she is very intrinsic to the DNA of the show from the first 3 seasons, that they would have to loop back around with her. But I think that this season, Monica's presence is honestly sort of like a Jen Shaw shake it up light kind of thing that she has going on. Like it's proven that I don't need that loop back around. I never need that.
I know. It's kind of shocking. I mean, when I watch that show every week, I'm like, wow, it's kind of
I don't
like
even
banger
think about
after
her.
banger with these episodes, and good. I mean, good for them.
Totally, totally. Okay, my next winner is Erica Jane. I think that last year at BravoCon, I noticed last year BravoCon was when Rinna got booed, and she was sort of, I think she took a lot of the heat off of Erica with her behavior last season at BravoCon, the will she, won't she come back narrative around that time. And I think that at BravoCon, Erica handled herself so smartly in that she started doing a lot of fan service. She went on a lot of panels. She was kind of acting in this sort of like Erica Jane pop star persona of like strutting on stage and being bitchy and like saying that thing about Dorit and PK on stage. And she was really giving the fans, I think, what we initially have always wanted from her, which is sort of like that over the top, sort of like gay icon vibe. And I think ever since then, I mean, she hasn't been perfect on this show. She hasn't, she gets wrapped up in things that there are still sort of lingering things from the Tom stuff. But I think overall, she has, even though I didn't like how she handled herself in that one season, I'm pretty impressed by the way that she's gotten out onto the other side, into the other side of the storm. And, I find her fun to watch on this show again, personally.
Yeah, it is. It almost happened like without me realizing it, where for a couple seasons there, I just kind of got the ick from Erica Jane's
Yeah.
whole presence. And then this season, it really kind of went away. And I think it probably is the best thing that could have happened for her to sort of just kind of like skate into the clear. Like there wasn't ever one big victory or one kind of like resounding moment. It was like she really just kind of weathered the storm, and she still feels like a really important piece of that cast.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, she might not like have as much money. She might live in a really small house without a guest room for her mom to stay in. Like she'll still share a bed with her. Like her tickets might still be going for like $5 or whatever that price is, but like she still has a Vegas residency. She still has a spinoff about that Vegas residency. And you know what? To me, that's winning on Bravo. Everybody wants a spinoff. That is like honestly that is one of the prizes I think that you get on Bravo, even if it's a 2 to 3 episode special. Like they all want that, and she got it. So I'm kudos to her. Kudos to her.
I will, for my next winner, I'll stick with Beverly Hills. I'm gonna go with Kyle Richards because I think that this year, in a time where being an OG in and of itself does not, mean that much in the Bravo conversation, I think that all of Kyle's personal roller coaster this year has really cemented her as the bitch that causes all the conversation. Like,
so true.
she has been such a tabloid fixture this year about, whether she's taking Ozempic, whether she's dating Morgan Wade, everything that's gone on with her and Mauricio has been such a topic of conversation on the show, in the fan community, in the, the tabloid and like blog space, whatever. I think that is, it's like she's making a powerful statement without even saying anything, that she is still relevant in such a strong way. And watching this season, her marriage and what's going on there kind of being such a main storyline, I was really skeptical before the season started about kind of how much she was going to share, whether I was actually going to be interested when she was sharing. Because I think I'm not somebody who's like, wow, Kyle and Mauricio, I shipped them forever.
Yeah, you're
like
not,
I thought
they're not your gold standard
really,
necessarily.
Yeah, I don't really care in that way. So I was sort of expecting it to be a little bit dull, but then even within the first couple episodes of the season, before we really got to like separation times, I already felt wrapped up in it, and that's continued. And I think, these last couple episodes we're starting to kind of, unpeel the, onion
Morgan's
or
on
whatever.
now.
And I think it's kind of it feels like she is still the central pillar of the show. And, I think there have been a lot of questions in the last few years about if Kyle's time has passed, if she's boring, if her sisters aren't on the show, do we still care about her? And this year, I think it's obvious that people care about her.
The answer is yes. Yeah. I think that,
yeah,
I think ever since Lisa Vanderpump left the show, it was sort of like she was always the alpha and Kyle was the beta. And it's like, how does the show operate with Kyle, with a quote unquote beta OG at the center of it? And, I think that Kyle you're right. She's proved her staying power. You said she's proven that she's still relevant. I think she's more relevant than ever in the pop culture conversation. Sutton is a stand-in for the sisters. Like, I don't think we really need Kathy and Kim. And, I think she's smartly, even though it sometimes can get pretty frustrating, she has smartly kind of drawn this out a little bit. This whole thing. It's been a trickling out of things, like I think both in her control and out of her control. But I completely agree. And I think that people still say that like she's so boring and yada, yada, yada. But I'm like, just look at the fact that I think she's the second biggest Bravo story of the entire year, this separation outside of Scandal. And I don't know. You're right. She's the bitch that causes all the conversation. And she wasn't really before. She really wasn't before, there were other people
she hasn't been. There have always been rumors and, people trying to stir things up, but it's never really felt like she was at the center of the storm until this year. And I think that helps her case, at least in terms of staying on Housewives. Maybe she's not enjoying it, but
right. Okay, I'm gonna do a loser. I'm gonna go with Robin Dixon. I think that Potomac, I think, is having its worst season ever right now, and it's not fun to watch. It's not that funny, and I'm not blaming it all on Robin Dixon, but I think that a lot of that negativity and that sort of frustration, I think, is really her whole situation is very indicative of that. And I don't like how I think that she could have come into this season and really handled it well. She could have been an open book. She could have really kind of addressed it head on, but I think she came in still not showing an understanding about why people were annoyed with her, why people felt kind of like hoodwinked with this whole situation with Juan, and like he is not playing ball, which obviously does not help her case. But that in conjunction with the fact that her and Giselle are icing Wendy and Candace out, and it's just not fun to watch. I'm maybe unfairly using Robin as sort of a representation of that frustration, but I think that she was kind of becoming this like low key, like low energy fave for a lot of people. And I think she lost a lot of goodwill with this whole situation this year.
Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier about how there's kind of that idea of like the like stability housewife who isn't always the most exciting one in the cast,
Yes.
but kind of it's like a Cynthia Bailey, a Dolores, like that kind of archetype in a housewives cast. And I think for a while on Potomac, that was kind of Robin's role, that Giselle was the really messy one and Robin was kind of the more chill one who kind of evened things out. And it does feel like Robin has sort of lost the plot a little bit in terms of what people want to see and what, just kind of like the attitude that is, helpful for making a housewives show. And I think there's a big difference between I'm not gonna freak out and cause all the drama and I literally just don't care. And I think she's veered a little too far into apathy in a way that makes it really hard to just kind of like move the ball forward.
And like, how do you root for somebody like that who doesn't care? It's just all it's going to do is make us indifferent. At the best, be indifferent, and at the worst, just project that. So yeah, that's I'm not very happy with Robin right now. But what about you? What's your next loser?
My next loser, this one is a little bit random, but I'm going to say Peacock Originals because, and specifically Bravo related Peacock Originals,
Okay.
because a few years ago when Peacock launched, I think one of the kind of ideas of what it was going to bring to us was all of this world of possibilities of like Bravo spin-offs and adjacent shows and new franchises and what have you. And so we have Ultimate Girls Trip, which
do we though still? We barely do.
4 seasons have been filmed. 2 seasons have been aired, or no, 5 seasons.
5 have been filmed. Yeah.
And 5 have filmed, 3 have aired, but the 2 that have filmed and not aired are now kind of mired in this, issue. And then we have Real Housewives of Miami, which was brought back very successfully on Peacock, and then also Below Deck Down Under, which both Miami and Below Deck Down Under did well on Peacock and then moved to Bravo for their most recent seasons. And so all of a sudden, the only Bravo content that Peacock is giving us is Girls Trip, but Girls Trip is in this weird, messy limbo. And I do kind of wonder, I'm like, have they decided that they don't want to use Peacock for like new shows anymore, at least Bravo related? Because now that we have all of our Bravo shows airing the next day on Peacock, like obviously there's a lot of that content there. But it is just kind of like, I feel like 3 years ago, we were sold on this vision of like new housewives cities and like fun shows cropping up all around, I don't know. And
no, you're right.
It does feel like they've pulled back from that a little bit. And maybe that was like, maybe they realized they really just want people watching Bravo shows.
You mean you don't want to, you don't think we're going to get Real Housewives of Venetka on Peacock anytime soon?
I don't know. I was thinking about recently that day on Twitter, like last year, I think it was, where there was like fan made like key art for
the most random
Winnetka,
cities.
Nashville, and Scottsdale going around on the same day, and it was like, we're getting 3 new franchises all on Peacock. And I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like more Housewives franchises is something that they're really considering at all right now.
No, I totally agree. I think in that Evan Ross Katz Today Show profile of Andy Cohen, Andy was sort of like, I think we're sort of maxed out right now in terms of Housewives content. No, but I totally agree. I think that you're right. Even a year ago, even when I don't know if you were there. Were you at that sort of influencer press event for the last season of Girls Trip at the Crosby Street Hotel, and it was like they had spent all
Yes.
this money and they rented out the basement. They had a whole screening for the premiere, and it was like Portia came as a surprise. I was like, okay, they're really like shelling it out. Like Peacock is a really exciting place to be if you're even if you're a former housewife. It's the place to be. And then within 6 months, it's completely changed. And I think you're right. I kind of the sense I think that we're getting is that they're not going to be doing that much more originals there in terms of the Bravo sphere. And, I think that we can tell by the announcement at BravoCon that like the exciting Peacock thing was that we're getting the uncensored reunions. And like, I love that. I don't get me wrong. Like, I think I love when they do that. And I'm glad they're just committing to that fully, but like, that's a low lift for them, right? Like it's not, and I think part of it was that the Peacock production value was so high, right? It was like pristine, and there was all these kind of like music video vibes sometimes to some of the interstitials. So it's an interesting and kind of unfortunate loss, I think.
Yeah, and I think with even especially like this year with all of the strikes that were happening, people were talking about how unscripted content was kind of going to be, have this boom of things being rushed into production and all of that. And it's like, okay, well, right now, Housewives has not been rushed into production. We have a lot of stuff airing right now and a couple of things in the can, but
the spring is going to be sparse. It is. Yeah.
I know.
It really is. And we can move on to the winners again, but I'm gonna take this off my losers list because I think it goes into this, which is like I was gonna say the everyone who was on the season 4 of Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip, because it's probably never gonna see the light of day. I almost even called out Alex McCord specifically because this was like going to be her much heralded like fun comeback. We were going to finally get Alex McCord back on our screen. So it's really unfortunate what happened there, but I just don't see a situation where we're going to get to see that.
That was on my long list of losers too. Like specifically like Gretchen Rossi. She's not doing anything else. Mm-hmm. Alex McCord, like that was for a few women, particularly on that cast, this was really going to be maybe game changer for them in terms of bringing their status into the current era. And
totally,
if it doesn't happen, that's going to be a big blow.
Yeah, and that kind of segs perfectly into my next winner, which is Phaedra Parks. I think that if we look at season 2 of Ultimate Girls Trip, Taylor Armstrong came out of that with a friend of role on a new franchise on OC, which is a 1-season situation, but it still got her back onto Housewives. Tamra, it got her back onto Housewives full time. It got Phaedra. I mean, it showed that there was still a way for Phaedra to come back into the scene and be well received after so much time away from Atlanta. And now she's on Married to Medicine. And, she kind of stole the show on that season of that Ultimate Girls Trip. And I think there were questions of like, how seamless is this addition to Married to Medicine going to be for Phaedra? Like, is it going to just feel like, she should just be on Atlanta or whatever? But I think it's worked so well. It's felt very natural to me. It seems like most of the women on that cast over half of them have been on it since the very beginning of their show. So they're very particular about who works on that show. And Phaedra to me is working. And just, I think, if you had asked me a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, if Phaedra Parks were ever going to be back on Bravo full time, I would have said there's no chance because it's Candy's terrain. And if Candy has any say, Phaedra is not going to be within 100 feet of her. So I think she's a big winner. I think it was kind of implausible.
Yeah, I think them putting her on Married to Medicine was kind of like the perfect magic trick of getting her back as a housewife without actually getting her back as a housewife. It's like she can do everything a housewife can do. Maybe less people are watching her show, but from a Bravo point of view, they can, deploy her the same way they would a current Real Housewife of Atlanta without kind of that thorniness of what do we do about Candy? Because Candy is one of the biggest, I think, sort of business partners of a Bravo lab. She really is doing a lot for them.
100%. And honestly, it's kind of, in a way, you can view it as a loss for Atlanta, which is not in good shape and needs another big star to come in and shake things up. And obviously that was never going to be Phaedra with Candy still around. But I think that like, if you compare the two situations, I don't know. They're in very different positions, those two shows.
Mm-hmm. My last winner is Southern Charm. I think
yes.
Southern Charm was a show that, like Vanderpump Rules, in the last couple seasons was starting to feel maybe like it had overstayed its welcome, a little bit long in the tooth. Some of the kind of webs that had been created of the cast felt just a little implausible of like, why are we still here?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this season they just have sort of stumbled into a new era for the show. And, you know, a lot of people had very mixed feelings about Catherine Dennis finally leaving the show prior to this season. They brought back Naomi last year. She didn't stick around after that one season. She came back. And, you know, we kind of all of a sudden we're in this new era this season of, okay, so all of a sudden we have to care about Olivia and Taylor and, you know, who are the people now that are the main people.
Right.
And I think it was sort of unlikely that it worked as well as it did, but because this cast frankly is so messy, it really turned into something that feels like must see TV in a way that Southern Charm has not been in years. And if you're a Bravo fan and you're not watching Southern Charm this season, it feels like you are really missing out in a way that I think I've told a lot of people in the last 2 or 3 years, don't worry about it.
Right.
It's fine. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, 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 no. This is important.
It's top of mind in a way that it has not been in such a long time for me. And I think to me it's a testament to leaning on your new people, leaning on your people who are a little more green on the cast and seeing what they can deliver. Because, you know, I think so many times when a show is in this sort of stasis period of like, all right, how many seasons have they got left in them? You know, they bring in somebody old to see if that can spark it, you know, and that didn't really work with Naomi, like you said. And I think this year they just leaned into these people who we really, frankly, don't know that well. You know, Taylor dated into this show, and for so long she was just Shep's girlfriend. Olivia, you know, was sort of defined as Austin's sort of like side piece last year and Catherine's friend. And then Catherine gets pulled out of the equation, and Austin's no longer her hookup or her boyfriend, whatever it was. And Olivia thrived. You know, I think Olivia has really shown herself to be one of, if not the star of the show for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of pieces had to fit just right for it to
Yeah.
work the way it has. And, you know, maybe next season it'll all fall apart again. But for right now, they've really they've made it work. And I think
Yeah.
honestly, I enjoy Paige DeSorbo so much on that
She's so
show when
great on that
she's
show.
there. That really, her dynamic with Craig, I think really works, and sort of her outside perspective, I think is something pretty unique on a Bravo show that we don't get a lot of crossover where it's someone that we actually already know. And like
Yeah.
that feels kind of seamless. And I think even Leva and Vanita kind of fill that role a little bit sometimes too. It feels like it's kind of like a finely tuned cast in a way that I don't know if they realized they were
It's
even doing when they were
I
putting it
agree.
together.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say about that is that, you know, Craig and Madison, I think, are two huge stars on that cast, but their relationships and love lives are so stable. And that's not going to be really a source of like really compelling drama. But they, like you said, they're so messy inherently, and they like to get their hands in that pot. So to me, been it's been fun because like the season has focus. It really is around this central kind of love triangle situation, but everyone has a say and everyone makes themselves involved in a way that just feels natural to this cast. So I agree. Southern
Mm-hmm.
Charm, huge winner of the year. All right, let's
Totally.
do one last loser. I'm gonna go with, and we have not seen this season, and I'll say I think Carl Radke is a loser of this year. I think that um, you know, he had been generating so much goodwill over the past, you know, 2 to 3 seasons, I think, of of Summer House. And, you know, he had gone through this kind of one of the kind of all-time arcs, I think, on Bravo in terms of like, you know, cleaning up his act and getting sober and dealing with, you know, the death of his brother and then finding somebody and getting engaged. And I think we obviously have not seen it play out in the show again, but you know, Lindsay has really taken control of this narrative in terms of like the public facing aspect of it. That, you know, she's a PR woman, and he's kind of faded into the you know, the abyss. And I don't really see a world in which like he comes out looking good from this, and I think that he's taken a hit. But obviously, we have not seen it, and that kind of teases what's to come next year. But I just don't. He had it all going for him, you know.
Yeah, I'm sort of dreading watching the majority of this season of Summer House leading up to the the breakup, because I just know it's going to be a lot of things that aren't going
Yeah,
to age super
I
well, and
agree.
I'm curious like how much they'll sort of edit it to be like
I'm really
foreshadowing,
curious. Really curious.
because I think that season could be like a tough hang until it gets really intense. But yeah, I mean it's too bad. I mean, the way it all worked out. I mean, I don't know. I'm honestly, I'm a little hot and cold on Summer House to begin with. Like
Hmm.
I think they've had some really compelling stuff, but a lot of the seasons feel like they sort of drag on to me. And so I think, I mean, I guess I'm glad that they have something like interesting happening in the season, but it does feel like it's going to be, pretty one-sided in terms of the reception.
Yeah,
And which is saying a lot, considering that Lindsay has always been one of the most polarizing people on Bravo.
exactly, exactly. And I think that, and maybe she will overcorrect, and maybe it will get people to sympathize with him. I don't know, but I think right now that everything's sort of pointing towards the opposite of that, and her kind of becoming more of like a less polarizing person that more people I think like. But who knows? I just that I feel like that sort of dominated early fall for us. So, what is your last
Mhm.
loser?
Okay, so I was deciding between a couple. I was thinking about Real Housewives of Dubai, just because I think by
Mm,
letting a whole year plus
it's
elapse between seasons,
I
the
agree.
air is out of the tire. But I'm gonna have to go with Bethenny Frankel. I think that Bethenny this year has, it feels like she's made a deal with the devil, where she has traded her Housewives reputation and legacy, which I think was sort of unique among everybody who's been on Bravo, for like virality and attention. And
Hmm.
it just feels like she kind of is, it's like she's getting a lot of cheap attention right now. And I think especially with, what she's doing on TikTok, who cares if you want to be like
Blink
going
and
to
you
the
miss
dollar
it, right?
store,
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
fine. But I think the reality reckoning stuff, it really feels like she she tried to do something so big, but it was so poorly thought out, that it's like every time she opens her mouth about it now in these more and more um sort of like official capacities, like the Vanity Fair piece and this article that was in the Cut recently, that was just
Oh,
sort of bafflingly
read it if you
just
have not.
bizarre.
Yeah.
It feels like it's so clear that she isn't actually trying to do anything real. And I think that aside from people kind of being like, LOL, what's Bethenny up to? I think in the long run, it's going to end up looking like this sort of vanity project that she tried to paint off as something altruistic. And it really just, I think, is kind of ruining her legacy in the Bravo community. And maybe she doesn't care. I mean, I think she would say she doesn't care, but I think just in terms of how people think of her, I think this year is going to be really tough to come back from for Bethenny.
I completely agree. And I think, well, it's a shame because at the core of what she first started talking about, unionization efforts and then kind of making sure that things on set and on productions were, up to par and treating everybody well and all these things. Like there are some good, there were some good missions within this broader reckoning that she was speaking to at the beginning, and I think that the message just got lost. She centered herself way too much in this mission that she was on, and it got so diluted that Vanity Fair article, it resulted in Ramona getting fired once and for all, but ultimately like it would just felt like a rehash of old stuff. And okay, like it just sort of like what new did she really give us this year that impacted that greater
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah. And she's talked a lot about how like all of these housewives and all these people from all these different shows are texting her that they're with her and on her side and all of this stuff. But the fact is, not one current cast member on any Bravo show has come out in support of what she's, quote unquote,
Exactly.
fighting for. And at the end of the day, if you want to unionize a group of employees, the employees have to say that they want to be in a union.
Exactly.
Bethenny can't do it for them. And so I think if that is her mission, she has failed completely. And if that's not her mission, then she's lying in a way that I think is probably even worse. And so, yeah, it just kind of leaves her looking at best ineffective, at worst really kind of manipulative, and like she's using these maybe real issues for clout. And she's executive producing Rachel's new podcast, so good for her with that.
Which
But
is
other
which
than
is
that,
like which is like you can read that in two ways, right? You can read that as, okay, she helped Rachel get this like cool opportunity and is helping her tell her story, but like it's also she's profiting off of that by producing the podcast. And it's just kind of like it's mixed messages. It's mixed messages all the time from her.
yeah, as Logan Roy might say, I don't think Bethenny is a serious person when it comes to these endeavors.
And on that note, what better way to go out? Dylan, anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Oh, you can listen to my podcast, Mention It All, wherever you're listening to Gibson's amazing podcast. And you can follow me on Instagram at Dylan Hafer and follow at Bravo by Betches for more Housewives hot takes, I guess.
Premier Bravo content, courtesy of Dylan Hafer, always. Dylan, thanks for being here. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Gibson.
Yeah.
Bye.
I want to gab.